Welcome back. The Marikana Commission of Inquiry has concluded its hearings after 2 years of attempting to establish what happened during the violent wage strike at Lonmin Platinum Mine in August 2012. 34 people were shot and killed in a confrontation with the police. 10 others, including 2 police officers and 2 mine guards, were also killed in the days preceding the August 16th tragedy. Presenting final arguments on the closing day, the police defended their actions. Advocate Ishmael Semenya for the police argued that the commission has little evidence to recommend criminal charges against National Police Commissioner Ria Pierga. The police lawyers called on the presiding commissioners to be fair in their evaluation of the evidence presented before them since the start of the commission in October 2012. Lawyers for the injured miners have called for justice to be served. Final recommendations will be presented next year. A lawyer for the injured, arrested and deceased Lonmin miners, Advocate Mpofu, says the police perceive the striking workers as enemies, giving final arguments at the Marikana Commission of Inquiry in Pretoria. Mpofu said it appears police plan to eliminate the miners on 16 August 2012 after they killed 2 of their colleagues 3 days earlier. Mpofu also argued that the police might have foreseen the outcome when approaching the striking workers, as they were armed to teeth with assault rifles while the workers were only carrying pangas, spears and sticks. The argument comes as the commission wraps up its hearings in Centurion south of Pretoria. Now, to give us an update on today's session, we are joined in studio by our reporter Nozintombi Mia, who has been following the inquiry in Pretoria. Nozintombi, a very good afternoon to you. Welcome to PM News. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, Alicia.
Nozintombi, we've been waiting on today to come. Let's first talk about what transpired at the closing arguments today. What happened?
Well, we had the continuation of Advocate Ishmael Semenya, who is representing the police, concluding the major point of his final argument before Advocate Mpofu, who represents the injured miners, had an opportunity to respond to some of the allegations that had come out of the police's closing arguments. And then we had the evidence leaders putting their final submissions in terms of going forward, what recommendations are they hoping will ultimately come out of this particular process. One of the big issues that Advocate Jeff Budlander, one of the evidence leaders, spoke about was around the issue of having a memorial site. And he spoke about how it's so critical to have a memorial site at a neutral venue, not necessarily by the Kopi, perhaps not anywhere near one of the shafts, either the career shaft, Western or Eastern Platinum, but somewhere that can be considered a neutral place where all the families of the 44 men who died will get the opportunity to go and pay tribute at that particular memorial site. And I think that was really one of the most critical things that have come out of this commission, because it starts talking to the issue of reconciliation and how we as a country and how the people of Marikana can start moving beyond what had happened in Marikana and start to heal the wounds.
Nozintombi, very interestingly, Semenya for the SAPS actually recommended that the commission state that the slain men were wielding arms against the state. Take us through that point.
Well, it's not necessarily a normal chain of events to see miners wielding pangas, machetes and all manner of sharp weaponry. It's not the normal course of events of how miners conduct a strike. We've seen over the years even more aggressive strikes, especially along the mining sectors. But we've never really seen the miners carrying such heavy weaponry. Usually they're holding nokiris or they're holding something else, but not weapons necessarily. And this was a game changer, according to what the police are arguing, that had the miners not carried those weapons, the police would not have been in a situation where they felt as though they were under immediate or imminent threat. And the fact that the miners were carrying those weapons talks to their intent. Why were they carrying pangas and machetes to go on a peaceful protest and confront the police? Why did the leader of the strikers, Mgineni Ngoki, who was colloquially known as Mambush, the man in the green blanket, why did he say to police on the ground that today we will die. There will not be two bulls in one kraal. That sort of fighting language that that we will not move until we get what we want, and police will go down with us. We are prepared to die on this copy. Sentiments like that gave the police on the ground the impression that the miners are not willing to go peacefully or disperse peacefully onto the Inkaneng settlement or either to the nearby hostels. So it was such a difficult position that the police were in. How do you maintain law and order when you're faced with a group of over 3,000 men who outnumber you, are overarmed? You know, yes, the police had R5 rifles, they did have weapons, but if those 3,000 miners were to mob and storm the police, no amount of weaponry really would have gotten the police out of that jam. And as much as the 16th was a tragedy, it would have been even more of a tragedy because we would have seen an even higher body count.
All right, Nozintombi, very quickly before I let you go, Dalimpofu's submissions and recommendations.
Dalimpofu recommended that Cyril Ramaphosa and Natim Tetwa, as well as National Police Commissioner Ria Pierre, face criminal charges, specifically for murder and corruption. Those were his recommendations as the lawyer who represents the injured miners. But that does not necessarily follow that the commissioners will agree with his recommendations, because we know the evidence leaders last week had said that they absolve Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa of any particular action in terms of, he could not have foreseen that him intervening would have led to the deaths of 34 people. But it will be very interesting to see next year, March, when the commissioners give their recommendations to the president. What ultimately do they recommend going forward? Are we going to see the National Police Commissioner facing some sort of criminal charges? Are we going to see any of the big political figures facing any form of criminal charges?
All right, so we wait for D-Day, which is the 31st of March, Nozintombi.
Yes, certainly.
All right, thank you so much for your time and consistent knowledge on the issue here, Nozintombi. That's our reporter, Nozintombi Mia, talking to us about the wrap of the Lonmin Commission of Inquiry.